Good afternoon. As I'm sure that you noticed, the background today is a little bit different, and it will be for quite a while. I'm active duty in the United States Navy, and I go where my country tells me to go. And not too long ago, I got tasked by the Navy to go spend several months on the or in the island nation of Palau, doing work there. And that's where I am. I got about 2.5, 3 weeks notice, and shut down all my cases and transfer them to other attorneys. And now I'm down in Palau. And, that's just part of what it means to be a karateka in the military, where you aren't stationary, you aren't necessarily geographically stable. It's very hard to make progression. And I know that, there's other areas of life where people have a similar issue. If you studied when you're in high school and you graduate high school, then you're off to college, or you studied when you're in college and all of a sudden you find yourself graduating and getting a job, moving somewhere else. It becomes a matter of like, how do you keep training? How do you keep doing it? And the answer to that is you just find a way to do it. So I haven't talked a lot about sort of the issues and things that I've had trying to train in Japan. So I'll take a moment to do that before I talk a little bit more about Palau. But when I was in Japan still, and when I get back, I'll have similar issues, but thankfully it'll be cooler outside. But in Japan, I'm at the base that I'm stationed at. There's a couple of gyms. And the one where most of the combat sports have their training, and it has a big wide open wooden floor. It's the one where you've seen videos previously. That space is not climate controlled at all, and it is in the upstairs of a building where the downstairs is the wood shop. And in the winter it's chilly, but chilly's fine. You're not going to die from exposure when it's 40, 50 degrees inside a gymnasium. It's not that cold. So toes get a little cold, whatever, keep moving, keep trying. But come summertime, Japan gets mercilessly hot in the southern part of Japan, even when you're still on like the main island, not even talking about Okinawa, which is its own beast. But in the part of Japan where I am, the humidity is extremely high. The heat is quite high. And between the two, it's just sweltering. And that's not to talk down to people who are from Texas and the other states in the Union, or in parts of the world where, heat and humidity are bad, and a lot worse when I'm getting there in Japan. But it's pretty rough. And, it's like, what do you do? How do you train in that? The answer is you train, and you train responsibly. And, I would go in and my workout changed. I would go in during the winter and the fall and the spring, and I would do, 45, 50 minutes of like a CrossFit type workout, jump on, utilizing the rower 2 or 3 days a week, but doing, some body weight stuff, doing some weightlifting, doing cardio on the rower to build all the muscles that I need to do the karate, and also obviously for the Navy side of the house with the PT test. As summer came into full effect, training in an unair conditioned gym like that, things had to change, because I could no longer do that 45, 50 minute hour workout, CrossFit style, leading into a karate workout that on its own would typically take an hour. So things shifted. I began to focus much more on doing just what the requirements for my Navy PT test are, and then also practicing like holding my shikodachi and other things that are more karate centric. But at the end of the day, it's about, how do you make life work? Well, you make it work. So I was making it work in Japan, and it was brutally hot, and, but you do what you got to do. So I get down to Palau. I've been here now for right at a week. My first couple of days, I was staying in a different hotel than I am in now. And at that particular hotel/resort, there wasn't a great place that I could find to train. And I was really scratching my head going, trying to figure out what in the world I was going to do, because I just couldn't seem to find a place. And then I get to this other hotel resort that I'm staying at now, where, Still nothing that's like super obvious, but you know, it the way that it's laid out is it's not like a big hotel tower. It's um, more a villa kind of layout, and there's grassy spots in between some of the buildings and whatnot. So I realized that, you know, about the best I was going to find was this little grassy spot in front of my room, and it sounds great until you realize that, you know, that area is littered with rocks. It's got lots of holes and things in it that aren't visible. So, you know, but you make it work. You know, I make it work. I go out and I train. And, you know, they've got a nice workout center here with an exercise bike and some weights and stuff. So I'm now being able to really to make use of that to work on that other aspect of my training as well again. But at the end of the day, you know, it's, how do you train when life gets hard? You find a way to make it work. And then, you know, how do I advance? How do I improve myself? Is there some mechanism by which I can do that when I'm training on my own and I don't have feedback of senseis? Well, yes and no. So no, in the sense that like an immediate correction when I do something wrong, the only place I'm going to get that's from me. And thankfully, I'm at a point where with the kata that I'm working on and the things that I'm working on, I know what right is. And when I do something wrong, I pause, I go back, I do it again. And if I get it wrong again, I'm like, all right, well, we're going to take it slow and by the numbers, you know, as they say when I was in the army, break it down Barney style and go step by painful step of just really slow, no tension, no nothing. We're just going through motions because then it allows my brain to process it and not rely so much on the muscle memory aspect, which is important. But the brain has to really be engaged with a lot of these kata, especially where movements are repeated, and it's the direction that changes, and it's not always the exact same type of directional change where it's varies throughout the kata. So. You know, that is one mechanism. Another mechanism has been, you know, again, I've been in Japan now for little over a year, about a year and a month actually, and um, back in March, I went back to Jacksonville. I was only a green belt at the time, um, and from really July when I got here last year through probably November, December, I wasn't training super regularly. I was trying to get used to the job. I was trying to find a place to train. I was trying to train at home, which was not working. And round about December, January timeframe, maybe at the end of November, it's hard to remember exactly when. I decided that I was going to be going back to Jacksonville to really train out, and also was wanting to take my belt test because, you know, I left. Whenever I had left, I had already, you know, performed kata that was above, you know, where I needed to be to get to green belt. I felt like I was further ahead than what the belt showed, so I really wanted to go back and if they thought I was ready to go ahead and test. So I knew I was going back. I had a case that was out of Jacksonville, near where the dojo is. So I arranged to take leave while I was there. So I took a week of leave, and I was also there for about a week. Some of it on leave, a lot of it for that case. But I was in the dojo every day, and I was doing private lessons because I knew that I needed to maximize my time. When you only have a limited amount of time with your senseis, you do what you can to maximize it. Now, if you can't afford privates, then that's fine, but you still need to go to class every time that you get a chance, especially when time is limited. And, you know, so at the end of that 2 weeks, I did take my belt test, and I went from green belt to brown belt. And about a month-ish later, I was back again. I was back in the States for a course in Virginia, and I took a week of leave down in Florida, so I flew myself down and spent another week in the dojo, again doing privates. And that weekend, I tested again, and made my first cue, my brown belt with black stripe. So, you know, that was a lot of my methodology was like I need to get as much information as I can, and I asked to video record it, and I will not share those with the wider world per request of my senseis, and it's the same reason I don't share full kata with the wider community, because I have been asked not to do that. The Shobukan organization is very protective of our version of the katas, and I want to make sure I respect the organization and their wishes with regards to that. So anyway, that's why those don't get published. But the other thing that has been incredibly beneficial is Sensei Nick. So Sensei Ray and Sensei Richard own and operate the dojo in Jacksonville and Ponte Vedra. And Nick is Sensei Ray's son, and he's about my age. And he's a fifth Dan, very, very talented martial artist. And last time I was in town, I mentioned, it would benefit me by getting feedback on what I'm doing and how I'm doing and what things can be improved and things to tweak. Because again, I've got the gross motor movements down for all the things that I need up through my first Dan. It was just like, can I get some things that I can like really zero in on and hone and make better? That's kind of where a lot of this recording kind of got its genesis, really, was initially I wanted it so I could kind of document myself, but I also I was hoping, and Sensei Nick eventually kind of stepped into that void and agreed to review the videos and things that I uploaded to, the place where I'm keeping those files. And, he reviews them, and then will send me a text message stream of video recordings of him explaining, here's how to improve this aspect of the kata, here's how to improve that aspect of the kata. And that feedback has been monumental. So while not real time, it is something that I can watch and I can digest it, then I can go back and look at it again. The other thing that has been useful is those videos that I recorded with Sensei whenever I was in town working, because, that was some real-time feedback, and it was honestly probably more than I could take on as I was standing there working it. And then, as I'm sure everyone knows, it's like you work on something and you fix a small error, and eventually you feel like you got it, and then a week or two later, that error creeps back in, or you don't touch that kata for a month or so because you're working on something else, and all of a sudden that old problem rears its ugly head again. So, I've had another video about always having that beginner's mindset. This is the place where that's really extremely valuable, is understanding just how important it is to always be willing to go back and look at yourself, always be willing to go back and assess kind of where are you. Never take the fact that you're getting the same criticism or the same feedback again as bad, because it's just how we improve. And, watching yourself is actually hugely beneficial. I know the dojo in Ponte Vedra and a lot of other dojos have mirrors. I think those are great for learning stances. I think those have great value in other places. One of the problems I had early on is I got distracted by seeing the mirror. Learn how to use them, and but the biggest thing that you need to learn is just how to take the criticism, how to take the feedback, and how to keep moving on from there. So wherever you are in your karate journey, remember, nintai.